Welcome everybody to Man Bites Retro. This month we are doing March Beatles Madness, and these four films are the amazing stories of the Beatles and our love for them and why we should all come together, because all we need is love. Enjoy the show. So on this episode of Retro, we have an amazing guest, Kelly Dunn, and she has basically brought up one of my favorite Beatles movies, well, probably my favorite Beatles movie, period, Yellow Submarine, and this is the animated film done, the best way possible that they could have done. Kelly, go ahead and give yourself a little introduction and all that stuff.
Hi, this is Kelly, and I'm here to discuss Yellow Submarine. I do some work with Narcotic Casserole Productions and the Cinema Schlock Society, and I guess that's about it.
Well, no, don't sell yourself short. Come on. On Narcotic Casserole, you do an awesome job doing that, what do you call it, Cinema Schlock and everything. It's so well done, and you guys add so much to it. So much.
Oh, well, thank you.
So, Yellow Submarine, why was this film the first film that you thought of when you think of the Beatles? What was the biggest impact that it had on your life, and how? Why?
I think it was because it was, at the time I saw it, it was unlike anything else I had seen, as far as animation went. I was still am, I guess, into classic Looney Tunes, even anime, and this was just so unlike, again, any animation style I had ever seen, and it was just so colorful and just all the motion. I remember the first time I saw it, and I'm just watching the opening, and I'm like, wow, this is so amazing. This is so different.
And then it gets so dark. I think that's really
what attracted me. Oh, yeah. Well,
when they get into England,
it's sad because of how it starts out, but it still looks great.
Oh yeah. The animation style is beautiful in this, and anybody that loves the 70s, 80s animation style, where they kind of blew the barriers and kind of went out there to the extremes of animation and what it could do with Ralph Bakshi, with the Lord of the Rings, Wizard, and all these other animated movies that came out around the same time as this. They're really going out to the extremes, and I think this film, playing with this musical backdrop that is the Beatles, the legend themselves, and I want to go into a little bit of the music. That
okay, yeah.
Why do you think they chose certain songs to play into certain scenes? How do you think that kind of played a part in the story, and how well did they execute that for you?
I'd like to start with the back of that question first. So,
sure.
I think that they did a great job of choosing the songs that would fit into the story, because I think if I were to look at this again and just follow the thread of the story, it's like, okay, what could fit in with this idea? So, for instance, when they're going through the Sea of Time,
yes.
It's like, okay, well, what can we do that has to do with time and, okay, aging, and, oh, hey, let's put When I'm 64 in here. So I think that their choices were really good because they fed back into the story, and it wasn't just, oh, let's stick a random Beatles song in here. Because again, they kind of took them from all over the place. It opens with Eleanor Rigby, which, so that doesn't really have much to do with the story, but it does have to do with,
because
it does, and it has to do with the whole theme of loneliness and everything, which is what Ringo goes into right when he starts. He's like, oh, nothing happens to me.
Yeah.
My life is lonely. So it does fit in that way, I guess.
But it also gives you kind of a perspective on the rest of the film, because it goes into the whole story and kind of brings in that group mentality feel in Eleanor Rigby. it's all about conformism and how society builds a person into Eleanor Rigby, this person that's
Right.
just dreary and goes through the motions each day, same way Ringo
Mm-hmm.
was feeling in the film. And then it touches upon that whole group motion, which we later see with the Blue Meanies and all that stuff, and we'll go into some of those other songs too.
Right. Well, just thinking about it, just right off the top of my head right now, I mean, that also kind of fits in with Jeremy, because he's
Yes.
very lonely.
Yeah.
As you know, as we realize, it's like, okay, we're going to be leaving now, and he's just so sad, and Ringo feels so sorry for him.
Because he sees that. He sees
Yeah.
that illusion of himself in that. And
Oh yes, definitely.
Nowhere Man is probably on my top 5 of Beatles songs that I
Mm-hmm.
love, because of the whole subtlety of this song. This song is so quickly written. It's so short, but
Mm-hmm.
it has so much depth to it that is incredible. And this particular scene in itself is so important in the film, and
Mm-hmm.
they made this song that wasn't a major hit such an important
No.
song. And it's amazing how they did that. They kind of lost the direction, which again, it goes back to Eleanor Rigby. It goes into that same thing. The whole theme of this film is this kind of sense of not knowing where you're going in life, how
Mm-hmm.
you feel when you're a teenager, feeling that angst
Yeah.
and that kind of, I need to do my own thing, but then I got to conform to society and then reel it back in to be, a blue meanie, basically, because you got
Right.
I mean, the whole Blue Meanie is this whole symbolism for societal norms, and how the societal norms of music in particular are incorporated in this film. And it's I think it's fascinating how we kind of go into this animated style, and it goes so deep into characters and into ourselves, and it's kind of an
Mm-hmm.
interesting window into ourselves, very much like Pink Floyd did with The Wall, but a lot
Right.
less dreary than Pink
Well,
Floyd.
no, no, because this does have a much more positive message, of course. With The Wall, it's like, well, you got to conform, and society is just terrible no matter what you do, so just give up.
Yeah,
Whereas this one is, conformity, bad, being yourself, good, just put your love out there.
yeah, yeah. And those two songs that wrap up this movie are
Mm,
freaking awesome. All You Need Is
yeah.
Love, and then All Together, which that song at the end, it's the whole theme of the movie. Yeah, you could be have no sense of direction. You could have no motivation to do a lot of things, but in the end, all you need is love. And if you come together with a group of people that you admire, your friends, your family, whatever the case is, people that have the shared
Mm,
interests, like we do at conventions all the time, like we do when we go to Narcotic Casserole for Cinema Schlock, all that. It's
right.
this friendship, this unity that brings us together and gives us a purpose in life. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that is such a phenomenal message to give out, especially to kids. And I think that's why the Beatles went with animation style in this film,
Right.
because it could make that impact on a child's life. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's fascinating. How about you, Kelly?
Um, well, I mean, I agree with everything you said. I don't know if this is a film that kids would necessarily pick up, but their parents certainly.
Well,
Um,
I mean, my
and
parents
I think
introduced
it,
it to me.
right. And I think you're right. It does make the message more attractive, and, that actually you see it, because the animation can do things where it can hit you with the message, where it doesn't feel like if something live action were going on, it's like, let me whack you over the head with this message.
Yeah.
Whereas with this, it can, it do it when it does it, like, let me really smack you with this message. It doesn't hurt, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it's all symbolism. It's all
Right.
surrealism. So it kind of goes into that Salvador Dali sense it's gently flicking you in the back of the neck type of thing. It's like, haha, we're telling you something. We're telling you something.
Right. Right.
But oh man, so my favorite song out of here is Nowhere Man, definitely, and then Sergeant Pepper. That when they play Sergeant Pepper finally, and it's both of the bands together. It's the Beatles and
Hmm.
Sergeant Pepper. I love that sequence, and they go into the Bulldog song, and I'm like, oh yes, yes, this is awesome, and it's just it's interesting to see Sergeant Pepper, which is their own amalgamation, their own song, their own style, and then it
Hmm.
goes to the Bulldog song, which is standard rock. It's your
Right.
establishment song. And I love that contrast where it's like they're trying to find their middle ground, how they could meet in the happy medium by playing
Right.
both songs. And I think that's fascinating as well because that's, I think, one of the most important things. Sometimes you do have to give in a little bit when you're an artist because sometimes our ideals are too extreme and we got to go subtly tapping at the back of the neck instead of, just stabbing people in the eyes with this is our music, this is our content. You lightly tap into it. And I think that's what the
Right.
Beatles did across their music career too.
Oh yeah, I was just as you were talking, I was kind of thinking about that, which is, I think it fits in with them where they were artistically because they'd done the happy little poppy songs, Ed Sullivan with the haircuts and the suits and everything, and then they were kind of like, well, let's, they're expanding their musical horizons. And I think people kind of went, this is a little weird, guys. I'm not sure about this. Today, of course, we recognize that, you know, that was brilliant artistically and, all the great things we have to say about the Sgt. Pepper era. But,
Right.
I think kind of then they had to say, okay, well, how can we balance what we want to do with where we were and where we might want to go and what might be not necessarily commercially successful as far as, biggest thing since sliced bread, but, they got to make a living.
Yeah, no, I think they're also trying to connect with people and have people play their music, which
Right.
that was the hardest part was that they're with the whole I am bigger than Jesus thing, they kind of got knocked off their pedestal for a while. So that's when it
Right.
kind of gave them that artistic freedom to change and revamp who they were. But also they couldn't come out of the gate too extreme.
Right.
So, I mean, they came out with Rubber Soul, which is my favorite album personally because it's kind of in that middle ground between the really experimental and really poppy of their earlier career. And
Yeah. I'd have to say Revolver's probably one of my favorites too, and that was
yeah,
the same time frame if I
yeah,
remember correctly.
yeah, I think they came out like a year apart or something like that. It's ridiculous. But
Okay.
what is now? Let's just go into the Beatles in general. What do you? Which song connected with you the most out of the Beatles? Which is the one that you remember the most?
Okay. The whole catalog or just this movie in particular?
Whole catalog.
Okay. Oh boy. Wow. Wow. You ask the tough questions, don't you?
Oh, always.
um, I actually would have to say Eleanor Rigby
Nice.
because I think because I discovered the Beatles when I was in high school, which was a fairly lonely time for me. And, I think that song really kind of hit me on that level that, I was also one of those lonely people and, also the style of the song I think really impacted because a little bit of trivia. It's one of the only songs where none of them play an instrument. Actually, I think
Really?
it is the only song where none of them play an instrument because it's all the orchestra. And,
True.
I remember the first time I heard it and I just, on a record, and I just picked the needle up and dropped it back at the beginning over and over and over again, maybe like 10 times in a row because I was just so blown away by it.
Nice. That's amazing. And I it's the funniest thing because the Beatles songs, every time I ask this question about a Beatles song, it's always some type of very emotional connection. And I think that's fascinating and more so than most musical bands because
Mm-hmm.
for some reason the Beatles kind of has this weird connection with our generation and our previous generation to us. And it's very interesting to see people's reaction. Everybody has an interesting story of how they discovered the Beatles and why their favorite song is their favorite song. A lot of it usually has to do with a very dark moment in their life, and they discovered this, and it was like, boom, mind blown type of thing, and kind of this moment of clarity where people get from their music. And you see that in this film. In Yellow Submarine, that's what they're going for. That's what they're trying to do, is inspire people and give people hope, because the Beatles aren't a dreary band like most rock bands. They're kind of like upbeat about it. We don't want revolution through violence. We want revolution like the song says.
Right.
Peace and unity and bringing people together. And I think that brings them apart from most of the rock bands and bands out there in general. And that's all because they had the license to do it.
I mean, again, especially at that point, because, you know, they'd been so popular. They actually, you know, they had people who would, say, oh, it's the Beatles, let's listen to it. Let's listen to the message. You know, they had the audience to speak to. Again, whether or not they would agree with them as they went, you know, a little more psychedelic, but at least they had the ears at first. You know, they had the audience's ear, and they said, okay, you know, here's our message. And some people are like, okay, you guys are getting a little out there for me. But again, they had the mass audience who would at least pay attention to what they have to say the first time.
Yeah. And it got a lot of people turned on to that type of music, the psychedelic music, which is interesting.
Right.
A lot of the documentaries that you see out there about the Beatles, it's like, oh yeah, one of my teachers started playing one of the albums, and it was just one of the pop records, and then we got hooked. And ever since then, we listened to every album that came out, no matter what the content was. And when they dropped Sgt. Pepper, everybody lost their minds. Everybody was like, oh my God, this is crazy. This is nuts.
Right.
And they even said that it's kind of like they wanted to stop touring because the tours were getting so outrageous and they couldn't be heard. They couldn't be understood when they were singing. So they started changing the lyrics even while they're singing in the concerts, because they're like, who cares? They're not gonna be able to hear us. They're screaming too loud.
Yeah.
And they're tired of that because they had written lyrics for a reason. It's not just a pop song that had no emotion. And even the most like mundane, or people think that it's mundane, it has so much more meaning to it. Like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, when you think about it, you see the song and then you watch Yellow Submarine and you see the
oh my gosh, it's just that sequence is just, that's so amazing. And it's funny because when you watch it, you're like, yeah, it is kind of like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, it's like it starts to translate on the screen, maybe what you pictured a little bit in your head. Again, not necessarily exactly, because there's a lack of tangerine trees and marmalade skies, but you know, you're watching and you're like, well, you know, this kind of is almost what I saw a little bit.
Yeah, and that the whole sequence, it's incredible when it opens up. It opens up with the mines and everything, and that
right.
I love that, because you're like, oh, that's what he was trying to say in the song, and you're like, wow, that's incredible that we have this alternate meanings that come out of these songs. And then when you see what the artist actually intended you to see, you see how much deeper it was, and you're like, okay, my mind is blown now. That was, no pun intended, that was awesome.
Yeah.
That was amazing. And that sequence, still to this day, I love watching it. Like, I'll pick up that clip on YouTube and I'll be like, wow, this is so cool.
Yeah.
Is there any scenes that in Yellow Submarine in particular that stood out to you as something that, for a person that's not really a Beatles fan, or if we've ever heard of one, hasn't heard of the Beatles for some reason, or a child that's being introduced to the genre for the first time, what would you show them to get them hooked on the Beatles from this particular movie?
Ooh, boy, let me think for a second. I might actually show that. Well, I might actually show them when I'm 64 because it's such a fun sequence, and the song is cute,
Yeah.
but it's also that whole idea of that love can last a lifetime. That because with so many pop songs, it's just like, oh, I want to be with you in the immediate.
Yeah.
And this is like, are you still going to be with me when I'm 64? And, are we going to grow old together? Those kinds of things. And the animation on that is also kind of fun. They're doing little dances in the background. And, it is just such a fun little song. It's like, oh my gosh, what is one of them says? Oh, senile delinquents, all of us. So
yeah,
like I said, it's fun and it's funny.
Yeah, I agree. I think that one and Nowhere Man are definitely those are the ones that I would show to like an adult, to a child. Maybe Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. I think they might appreciate that because of all the psychedelic colors and all the crazy animation style that they put into that scene in particular. But it could seem kind of hokey to a kid just because the animation is so outrageous in some parts. So I don't know.
Right.
I think those are the two closest ones that I would choose because I mean, I think you're right about that. Honestly, though, that probably is the best one, animation style and everything. But so overall, what do you think? First of all, what do you? Any other comments that you wanted to bring up about this movie, or anything else that you wanted to touch upon that we haven't brought up yet?
Well, I wanted to talk about. I think it's very funny. I think it's just a funny movie. Just from the opening sequence, some of the the verbal play, like the one about the the University of Wales.
Yeah,
puns are great. Yeah, that's a great one. One that I quote a lot is the unidentified flying cupcake. Or hey, would you believe me if I told you I was being followed by a yellow submarine? Just little jokes like that. I like wordplay. I like subtle humor like that.
Yeah, and they do a lot of it, and like fixing a hole.
Oh yeah, How many holes do you think there are? Enough to fill the Albert Hall. Again, the callbacks to some of their other songs. Like, oh, I see what you did there. That's clever.
Right.
That's clever. And that each of the Beatles is kind of their own character. It's like, okay, this is John's the intellectual one. Ringo's kind of the everyman. George is there to mess with people's heads.
It's all in the mind.
Like, yeah, I mean, how do you know it's your car? Well, it's blue with yellow wheels, and then drives by in red with orange wheels. And he says that he thinks that's odd, considering what comes with the rest of the movie. It's like, that's the oddest thing in here?
Right? And then, you have Lennon that is like this crazy, trippy, like Ben Kenobi character in this movie.
Right.
It's pretty hilarious.
Yeah. Like when he starts trying to explain why there's doubles of them. Yeah. And Paul just goes off and sings a little song. Like, I'm not paying attention. Any old iron. Yeah.
Yeah, that part is great. I love the what do you call it? I got a hole in my pocket. That line. Oh, yeah. I don't know why. I find it so amusing. Me and my friends picked it up and made it a running joke. Every time we pull something out of our pocket and we go, oh, look what I have in my pocket. Do you have a hole in your pocket? It's turned into a running joke. And this is the kind of humor that you find in this movie if you've never seen it. It's this British kind of puns, sarcastic humor, because it is very sarcastic at times.
Oh, yeah.
And it gets really dark, sarcastic in some parts, and you're like,
oh yeah, oh. Yeah.
I didn't think they would go there, but okay.
And the actually one of the other things I just thought about was the one sequence where they're pressing all the buttons in the yellow submarine and the banner comes out that says "Welcome to Rolling Stones." And,
Yes, yes, I picked that up too. I was like, oh, look at that.
Yeah, it's like some of these you miss them the first couple of times, but this is one of those movies that you can watch over and over, and it's still enjoyable the 5th time and the 45th time, I think.
Right? Seriously. I just watched it today again just to refresh my mind, and I was catching things that I hadn't caught before, and I've seen this movie probably a good 10, 11 times. I love the background of just doing things around the house, and then you sit for a couple minutes, watch, and then continue on. But oh my god, yeah, there's so many subtleties that I picked up when I was literally just 100% laser focused on the movie, and you're like, wow, this is not as subtle as I thought it would be.
Well, I mean, and some of it I found myself wondering, because the first time I saw it was, it was a video cassette in the 80s, and then of course, now you have a lovely remastered version on DVD, and there's been a couple times I found myself saying, wait, was that always there and I just missed it?
Yeah. I like the Rolling Stones things. I didn't notice that until today. Literally today, I saw that for the first time.
Oh, wow.
I had never seen that before. I was like, huh. But also, I was watching it for I think the second time on a DVD. Before that, I'd only ever seen it on VHS. So it's that difference in quality, the remastering of it, that you see these little subtleties in the background, and there's a lot of innuendos about the music industry. There's a lot of innuendos about the corporatism of the music industry, and the apples, even where the apples are color than their label, and it's so interesting seeing that and kind of psychoanalyzing this film, because even the blue meanies, they're all phallic symbols. They all have the giant nose and then the two balls on their head, and it's like, the male driven whole aspect of corporate America and corporate America taking over these images, but then at the end, the subtlety of this one corporate mongrel that finally grows flowers and is able to be one of them. And I love that little subtlety. It's interesting how they did that. And if you watch this movie and you really listen and watch closely, you start picking up on all these things that kind of take stabs at modern society of that era, especially.
Right.
And I love that, because you could watch it as a kid, or you could watch it as an adult and see these deeper meanings in it, and that's always fascinating for a movie, and that's what makes it timeless.
Right. Yeah. No. Again, I mean, this is very much rooted in, as far as the time. The music is from the '60s. The whole psychedelic movement is from then, but there's still something in there that we can enjoy now, because the message in it, like you said, the psychology in it, the story in it, what they're trying to say isn't rooted to just one time. The trappings are, but not at the heart of it.
Yeah. And I mean, this is 1968. So this is
right.
I mean, this is literally in the middle of the whole change, the middle of everything happening. And this came out right before the whole darkness in American culture, even, where they had the moon landing, but they also had the assassination and all this dark era of the late 60s, and kind of the hippie movement, but also the assaults from Vietnam and everything, all the violence going on. And this is one of those films that were very much needed. It kind of told everybody, look guys, let's stop the violence on both sides and just kind of chill out, love each other, and come together. And I think that's the whole message about the Beatles in general, and this film personifies that so well. So overall, rating wise, what would you give this film from a 1 to 10?
Oh, this is definitely I would say a 10. I would give it a 10.
Nice.
Again, I would watch this over and over again. If I had a desert island DVD thing that I had to do, I would bring this.
Nice. That's awesome. That's really awesome. I would give it probably an 8 or 8.5. I love this
Okay.
movie, and I really enjoy the movie in general. But it has its quirks and kind of things about it that kind of piss me off at times. But I mean, that's every movie.
Well, yeah.
But thank you so much, Kelly. And is there any social media sites or anything that they could look you up if they want to see any of your other content?
Oh, they should definitely look on YouTube for the Cinema Schlock Society, again, part of Narcotic Casserole. Please like and subscribe. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome, Kelly. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode, and hopefully many more.
Okay, you're welcome. I had a lot of fun.
Same. And anybody else that wants to check out any of our regular content, you could check out our Doctor Who in Review. On Mondays, we post up a new episode with Diversely Geek. We work every Wednesday with Man Bites Retro, and we bring on a new person to talk about a person, film, or subject in film history. And then Friday, we have our discussion group that it's basically 3 drunkards talking about movies and having fun. And you could check it all out on manbitesfilm.com. And you'll also find the link to Narcotic Casserole because he's part of our group as well in there. So we'll see you guys next week for another episode of Man Bites Film.